he got it wrong with David Icke, that's for sure. And actually, this was not how I intended to begin, because David Icke is a very thorny subject and very difficult to get your head around. I still have a little trouble with reptilian shapeshifters, which is not to say anything is possible until proved impossible. And David Icke has been right about just about everything else, so I'm going to give him some credit. And what I've been doing, and of course nobody knows who the hell I am. I'm not anybody. Well, I am. I am a human being. What I've been doing in video after video after video is defending myself for being angry at what has happened in the world and to me. And I shouldn't have to. I shouldn't have to. And neither should anyone else who has spent the first 40 years of their life being abused, which I was. Of course, you might say, well, I wasn't Elizabeth Fritzl. I wasn't locked in a cellar. Why didn't I escape? Well, it's a good question. If you're not me. If you're not trauma bonded, if you're not living a couple of miles away from your parents, and with apologies to my daughter, whom I love very much, she was fond of her grandparents. We were caught in a trap. It was a very, very clever trap, whereby whatever I did, my father manipulated it and turned it to his advantage. So though a number of people have paid me the compliment of thinking me intelligent, and meant to think so too, I have to give credit and say my father was far more so. But then again, he was not working on his own. He was in a very, very large ring. Bet your life I'm angry. I had my childhood taken. I had my teenage taken. I had my 20s taken. Things did look up an awful lot in my 30s, due entirely to my own efforts. I had far more hindrance than help. What did my father do in my 30s? Well, let me see. When I was 35, he murdered my mother and made damn sure I knew about it. And when I was nearly 40, he murdered Fiona, and ditto, made damn sure I knew about it. And no matter how angry I feel about everything he did to me and to the child I saw him abuse, the greatest traumas for me were his indirect confessions of murder. 2 of them. They tore my world apart. Okay, they didn't do much for the people that got murdered either. Who got murdered? Yes, this was the man who supposedly fathered me, he didn't bring me into this world. My mother brought me into this world. But my father provided the sperm cell. And in our naive society, the general idea is that the father is supposed to protect the children from harm. My father exposed me to every type of harm he could think of, every type of cruelty he could think of, and every time that my life was going well, he tore it down. He absolutely tore it down. Whenever I would fight my way out of whatever the latest was, my recovery from alcoholism, within days of that, my mother was in intensive care. which never was adequately explained. She had mild asthma. Suddenly, from mild asthma, which was cured in seconds by a ribavian inhaler, not like the asthma that I had. My asthma attacks used to last between 8 hours and 12 hours, primarily because they were not treated. My mother's asthma was treated within seconds by a ribavian inhaler, until just after I got dried out, at which point I had a phone call to say my mother was in intensive care, with a 50-50 chance of living and blood clots on her lungs. I still do not understand how she got the blood clots on her lungs so suddenly. But she understood. She was visibly terrified of my father in the intensive care unit. Visibly terrified of him. And he spent the next 9 years killing her by inches. I am angry. I have always been angry to a degree. I think probably the most calming influence on me was my dog Flossie. Wonderfully calming influence for 9 years. Slight tangent. Danny is a very excitable male intact dog and more of my little boy than my calming companion. Anyway, I do have things to say that I believe are worth saying. I did do an enormous amount of research into what my father was getting up to during his 19 years in London. And what he was getting up to was being a part of an enormous, I've called it a porn ring, paedophile ring would be more accurate. I've said numerous times that I do not believe that by chance there were two men with the same alias of Dick Oakley, living at times in the same area, working in the same job, and connected by the date of Fiona Green's death. One present at it, the other dying on the anniversary of it. Many, many times I've said this now. But then again, there was the double life he lived as two different Desmond Oakleys, but one Desmond Oakley. 2 in 1, 1 in 2, I've talked about that. Okay, it wouldn't appear that anybody has ever heard of him, except for the people to whom I mentioned his name, all of whom were terrified when I mentioned it. One of whom got murdered 2 years later by a hitman, and he was a hitman, and the other family sold up in 48 hours, moved out in 48 hours, having lived in their house for 75 years. Now, it may be that the world at large has not heard of a man whose alias was Dick Oakley, but I can be absolutely certain that some people had. People within the criminal network, people who knew what was going on. And I am getting very tired of wasting my time and my videos defending myself for being angry. I have a right to be angry. And so have a lot of other people who were caught up in this, passively caught up, not actively caught up, in this evil circle. And there are, in fact, funnily enough, a number of things I do have in common with David Icke. Not least that I totally agree with him about the Masonic families on the Isle of Wight, the Satanic Masonic families on the Isle of Wight, because I have traced my own bloodline to the Masonic families on the Isle of Wight, and can prove it. And in fact, the first time I ever heard of David Icke was when I googled Satanism on the Isle of Wight, and up came David Icke, of course. What else would come up? But I had never heard of him before that. I do puzzle as to why he lives among so many satanic families voluntarily. I would want to get the hell out. I also puzzle as to why they don't kill him. I think that's probably because at least 50% of the world still regards him as mad, and as long as they're regarding him as mad, he's not actually a danger to the powers that be. I don't want to think that I've spent years and years and years doing the research I've done, finding the things I've found, and then I waste, as I say, video after video, defending something I have said, not on video, some comment on Facebook or another. I don't have to defend that. A lot of people now use Facebook as a diary. So do I. On these videos, I want to talk about the things that are important, not just to me, because David Icke does have it right, doesn't he? Don't you think? It is 1984, except that it's 2016. We are losing all our freedoms. There clearly is a plot to produce a new world order, starting with a federal Europe. Well, not necessarily starting with it, but a federal Europe would obviously be a part of that. Borders torn down, so that, far from being multicultural, there will only be one culture. In Europe alone, there were so many countries, so many languages, so many peoples, so many cultures, national costumes, different foods. Variety is the spice of life, I think. And actually, multiculturalism is not being celebrated, it is being torn apart. There will be one culture, and only one culture, not just in Europe, but all over the world. And of course, that is one area in which I totally agree with David Icke. I haven't read his works. I have listened to a few of his videos. Perhaps I should listen to a few more. Unfortunately, I do get depressed by it all, and my concentration span doesn't generally run to about more than 20 minutes of YouTube, which is part of the reason why I tend to keep mine a bit shorter. But what can we see worldwide? Police gaining more and more powers in every country, and citizens losing them. Now that we have no legal aid, we cannot even get help for ourselves against any injustices visited on us, unless life or liberty is at stake. For example, if we are evicted from our homes illegally, we cannot redress that balance in any way, shape, or form. We could, and many people are now on the street, and moreover, I have actually seen signs telling people not to give money to the homeless. I've seen these signs for myself now. So we also have eugenics going on. There's no doubt at all that the populace is being culled, as per Might is Right, as per his recommendations. Social Darwinism, Nazism, often disguised, funnily enough, as well, there is no left and right anymore. There's no left and there's no right. There is basically one party. Jeremy Corbyn is threatening that just a little bit, which is why, of course, the newspapers are coming down so very, very hard on him. He is a little outside that one central party, although he does appear to want all our borders torn down and a federal Europe, which will then become a federal world. So at last, at least, perhaps I've said a few things on this video that might strike home somewhere.